Hey everyone, Marty here at the top of the show with a few announcements. First, I'd like to apologize for the delay in this episode's release. If you've been with us for a bit, you'll notice that we've been missing the mark on our planned monthly uploads, and that's on me. I'm in the process of reevaluating our scheduling and release process for the show and how we want to move forward in 2024 and beyond. Due to this, we're taking another very brief hiatus after this episode to plan out what the rest of our year is going to look like. We'd like to thank our audience deeply for their patience as we continue to find our stride as a show. On a lighter note, I have something fun to share with you. As you know, College of Whispers' intro and outro music is by my band, Winter Wayfarer. On the day this episode of the podcast is released, Winter Wayfarer is also releasing the first single off our upcoming album, Black Box Part 1. The song is called Marshall You Have No Friends and will be available on major music streaming platforms on June 16th. Here's a short preview.
Misery comes with the label, and now everything I do is denounced as insane. Were you there before? Did you ever leave me? Have I lost control? Am I still not yet completely here?
I've provided a link to the music video in the show notes. Please do check it out. Now, without further ado, let's get into the latest episode of College of Whispers. Welcome to College of Whispers, the actual play book club. I am your host, Marty, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Vicky.
Hello.
This month, we have the honor of interviewing Jeff Stormer. Is it past him or future him? You don't know. From Party of One. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited.
Party of One is I guess I can't nail this down to a system. You guys play so many systems. An actual play podcast where the table is always set for two. The original premiere date of Party of One, according to my podcatcher, was November 3rd, 2015. There are 413 episodes at the time of this recording, and the average runtime of the episodes that we listened to was an hour and 22 minutes. Since there are over 400 episodes of this show, we could not feasibly listen to every single one before our interview today. But we did choose 10 that stood out to us. So today we will be discussing episode 110, Monster of the Week with Cole Burkhart, 172, D&D 5th Edition with Aram Varshan, 311, the My Little Pony RPG Alex Perlman found, 314, Brindlewood Bay with Chris Bissett, 322, Iziba's Bed and Breakfast with Mercedes Costa, 328, Things Eldritch and Terrifying with Super Dylan, 395, All the King's Goblins with Brandon Lee Mulligan, 403, Full Court with Riley Hopkins, friend of the show, and 413, What's So Cool About Doomed Self-Loathing with Grant.
Sick.
So,
Love it.
Jeff, I want to start with a question that we ask everybody at the start of the show. What got you into actual plays? What was your sort of inspiration for starting the show?
What got me into actual plays was this was 2013, 2014. I fell in love with the One Shot podcast. That was the show that introduced me to what an actual play was. And I had been listening to that for a while. A friend of mine was prepping. He was a podcaster and was prepping a podcast network. He was going to expand his one show into a network of shows. And we both being creative towards he kind of approached me and said do you have an idea for a podcast you would want to launch that we could host on this network? I really wanted to do something. I was itching to do a creative project. The timing of this couldn't be better. I started thinking on ideas. I couldn't find the exact right angle. producer of the show, Jen Frank, kind of came to me and was like, hey, you play a lot of 2-player games, and I know you listen to One Shot and a few other actual play shows. Like, what if you did one that was just like the 2-player games that you look into, in your personal life? And I was like, okay, that's an interesting topic. Let me kind of sit on it. And that kind of evolved into a show where I play a different 2-player game with a different guest. That kind of, the seed of the idea was there. We started developing it. It kind of took, originally it was going to be a mix of 2-player variety plus an ongoing game with the single guest every time. That guest kind of dropped out at the last second. They realized, I don't actually particularly want to be like a public-facing podcast host, so they kind of backed out. And at the same time, my friend's podcast network just kind of like the plans for that also fell apart. So I was left with this one specific idea that Jen and I both kind of continued to workshop and develop, and then we spun that into Party of One as it exists 8 years later.
It was kind of the perfect storm of like, to have a show that has lasted this long in this space is very admirable, I will say. A lot of shows that we've covered are either very, very new or maybe hit like the 3 to 4 year benchmark, but to have a show, coming up on almost a decade is very impressive. Amazing. And your backlog of episodes definitely speaks to that. If anybody, kind of was curious about how we selected the episodes that we did select, Party of One has a wonderful feature on their website, partyofonepodcast.com, where you can search by guest or you can search by the game that's played, and you can get, the list of episodes that feature said guest or said game. And I think that's a great way. This podcast is very easy to get into. There's not, for the most part, an overarching narrative across all 413 episodes, so you can pick up whichever one you want, whatever you're feeling like listening to, and just drop in. And I really like that.
It took the better part of a year to get this system up, because we had been running for about 5 years before I really started to think about like, how do I looked over, like, this was probably around like the 200 mark where we kind of started to look around and go like, we could probably make this easier to like discover the show. So no, we started like, but that required going back through the entire backlog of the show and tagging the systems being played, tagging the genre of the game, all of that kind of stuff. Like, it was an ordeal to pull all of that into the system on the back end, and it was something that I was literally just doing when I had some time of like, what are the genres that we want to sort by, which episodes fall into that, what constitutes which genre. It was a tremendous ordeal getting the website to a place where it could support that.
Yeah, I'm actually figuring out how much of an undertaking that was, and I like admin. I love admin. I don't know if I like admin that much. That sounds...
That's fair. It helped me think about the show in a specific way when I can kind of break down how people are discovering it. Like, it's a very good marketing tool to have in place, and it's kind of a thing I'm always thinking about, of like, the show's got a lot of episodes and has been on for a long time. How do you help people discover it? And I have found the website has been a really successful and specific way that like has helped people find the episode that I'm certain that they would be most excited to listen to.
Yeah,
for sure. And the thing about just the list of games that you have here, very few repeats. I think the most of a game that I see on this list is like you've done one game 6 times, and that's the highest number I've seen. And for 400 episodes, like there's so many games out there that I never would have even like thought of. With all that out of the way, it's very easy to discover what you would like to see out of Party of One. But I would like to know, how do you come across all of these games? Like, this is a truly wild amount.
So originally, like, for a long time, it was just that I collect games. Like, it was just I had a lot of games on my hard drive. If I saw a neat sounding game on the internet, I would download it, save it, and stash it for a rainy day, which is one of the things that really drew me to doing kind of a one-shot focused, variety show approach. Was I have a lot of games that I want to play, and the show, as it developed into we're playing a different game with a different guest every time, really suited that nicely of like, oh, okay, cool. Now I get to play all of the little games that I didn't think I was going to get into before. Nowadays, there's a few different ways that I go about finding things. The big things are, I still just like cruise through, I will cruise through Itch or cruise through DriveThruRPG or cruise through Twitter, what have you, to just like see what people are talking about, what's crowdfunding at a given moment, keeping a finger on the pulse that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also lucky enough at this point, especially that the show as late as it is in the show's run, like we get sent a lot of things. A lot of designers will be like, hey, I'm publishing a game, and I've kind of put together a game submission form so that and a guest request form to kind of help me with that process, to kind of allow people to say like, hey, this is a thing, which also helps me know, hey, this is a thing that someone feels comfortable with me playing on the podcast and introducing to people, which is not always necessarily the case. So it's a mix of like active outreach from people, just casual like trolling or trawling of, the various places where indie RPGs get published. A certain degree of I know a guy who knows a guy. Like, I am friends with enough people who can point me in enough directions of like, hey, hey, so-and-so's working on a cool game. Let me introduce you, or let me send an email introducing you. And then some of it is just flat out luck, frankly.
Do you know how many games you have stored? Is that something you keep track of, or?
It is not. I have a lot more of them stored virtually than I do like on my hard drive at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, especially like in the modern era of RPG super bundles for charity. Like, I'm
Yes.
guessing my library is inadvisably large, if I had to guess. Let's see. What if I click view all? Is there a way for me to see like what the full number? There is not, tragically. There's more. I own more games than I will ever get to play in my lifetime. I don't know the exact number, but I know that like I will never run out of things to play on the show.
For sure. There's somebody else who collects all the bundles, like the Humble Bundles, the TTRPGs for X charity. I'm collecting them, and I'm just sitting there thinking, when am I going to play them all? And yeah, I'm just probably the same, never going to get through them all.
A big thing for us at this point is, especially in the last like year or two, heading into the next year of the show, is like we're doing a lot more outreach to guests who are outside of like the game space, which is giving me a lot of opportunities to like crack open, because we've done a lot in the past of games with the person who designed the game, or like somebody who was doing a podcast of the game and is very familiar with it. So like, but now I'm trying to like really reach out to people who are outside of the game space, who might play games in their personal life, but who are making shows and things and music and books and such that like might intersect with games, and trying to find games that sort of evoke the things that they're working on, to try and, for lack of a better way to put it, like there is underneath the hood of Party of One, there's a lot of common DNA with like interview shows, and I'm trying to kind of draw that out, which is also giving me a chance to like crack open games that like I haven't found an opportunity to play yet, or like I haven't found the right vibe of like actively reaching out to someone and saying like, you work in a space, here's a game that is kind of in the same spaces that you work in, would you like to play it on the podcast?
Speaking of sharing the sort of DNA with interview shows, we also wanted to take some time to talk to you, a veteran of the space, about how to, or what it means to be a good host of a show, because we're a relatively new kids on the block. We just crested episode 10 not too long ago, so we're always looking for ways to sort of learn from others and grow our craft, as it were. So I guess trying to find a good question to sort of ask. Vicky, do you have any?
To do with hosting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, because obviously the big question is, how do you host? Obviously, but I'm trying to narrow it down because that's just such a broad.
I know. I was kind of the same way. I was like, what do you do?
I feel like we're about to hit like an IGN like top 10 hits of a hosting type thing. I don't know. Don't know where that was going. Sorry.
I have been thinking about this topic a lot lately, especially as like I think a thing that is really interesting about hosting, especially about like where I fall and where Party of One falls in kind of the ecosystem as a whole, is like I've been thinking a lot about show hosts, about the role of a host and kind of how it factors into things. And I think what I've kind of noticed, or what's kind of up in conversations with other people working in the same kind of space, is it's interesting to think that not every actual play show has a host. I think there's an interesting thing to consider, like that like as we're talking about hosting a show, I think it's interesting to kind of consider what a host is.
Okay.
And it really came up for me. I was talking with a friend who does an actual play show. As I was trying to think about, like, I'm in the early stages of possibly pitching a panel to Big Bad Con. I haven't locked it in yet.
Right.
I've got a month to do that. I may or may not lock it in. We'll see how it goes. About like what hosting a show means, about like what it means to host something. And in doing so, I was like, well, I very much consider myself a show host. I consider what I'm doing hosting a show.
Yeah.
And in talking with a friend of mine who is like a cast member and executive producer on an actual play show, I kind of asked him, hey, do you think your show has a host? And he immediately comes back and says, no, I think at most we have like a face of the show in backstage interviews, but like when we hit record, there is no one hosting the show. And I think that's really interesting. And I think that's true of a lot of actual play shows in specific, which I think kind of starts to gesture towards what, to your question, what makes a good host is really the question of like, what is someone doing when they are hosting as opposed to performing on the show itself? Like the thing that kind of prompted me to think about all of this was really thinking about what is the difference fundamentally, if I'm defining this, what is the difference between a actual play host and an actual play GM? Like, is a GM inherently hosting the show? And I'm really thinking, both from my conversation with my friend and also like just thinking and looking over the shows that I listen to in general, like I don't think those are the same thing. And I think that's a really interesting angle to pull on.
Yeah,
sure.
there is some like overlap in the skill set, but at the end of the day, it is still like it is they're kind of different roles, right?
Yeah. And I think that there's like a degree, there's a degree to which there's a degree by which in the way that like a lot of sort of disparate responsibilities kind of get placed on the GM of a show. Like very oftentimes they kind of get thrust into a producer's role and into these other things, which can be distributed to other people at the table. And is, you know, every show is going to be a little bit different in that regard. But there is a sense of, I think a lot of times like they kind of get thrust into a role that is similar to a host, but I've come to think a lot about like what makes those roles different, what makes those roles distinct as like a responsibility set, so that I can really say like, okay, this is what makes a show host effective, and this is what we're doing to kind of amplify that on Party of One.
Yeah, no, I'd not thought of, when you say like the GM, like the many hats that a GM has when they sort of take on an actual play, they're not necessarily thinking that they're going to be the host of the show. They're more the GM and sitting there. So it's a completely different role. Yeah, for sure.
And I think the thing that's really like, I think here's my theory. Anyway, here's my I could be talking out of you know where. I could be completely wrong, as I have surmised it. In studying various shows, it feels to me like the key of hosting is that you are the connection point between what is happening in the audience. It is an audience-facing role very specifically. And I think which is obviously difficult when you are in a play, like in an environment like we're in right now where we don't have the audience in front of us. But I think to me, like, the host's role is being the person who lets the audience in the door and like sets a place for the audience in the conversation. And I think that is like something that like often the GM ends up doing. Certainly it's a thing that like we do, or I do on Party of One very specifically, and that's intentionally by design because I'm pulling from a lot of specific shows that have hosts. Like I always say that the closest shows to Party of One as like a property are Hot Ones and Fresh Air on NPR. Like those are the shows that like connect to what we're doing on Party of One most specifically. And that means that like I am a host and interviewer very often, and like it's that sense of you're the one guiding, you're the one like you are kind of the audience stand-in and like processing, you know, or like guiding the audience's eye a little bit to show them what you want them to see, for lack of a better way to put it. This is a topic that I admittedly think about constantly.
That's good, because you know it's kind of our blessing on this show is, you know, you bring somebody on to talk about something they're very passionate about, and then suddenly you don't have to talk as much because they're very passionate.
Sure.
Hey folks, we just want to take a break from the action to let you know how you can support the show. As a part of Bard Rock Network, you can support us through a number of affiliate programs, where a portion of your order goes to support the network. Everyone loves dice, right? FanRoll Dice can make dice of all shapes and sizes, as well as accessories like trays, bags, and towers. Or maybe you want to take better campaign notes. Just check out Minva RPG and look at their assortment of campaign journals and tools. Finally, you can level up your game night with tea or coffee from Many Worlds Tavern. In addition to delicious tea and coffee, they have stickers, tokens for your favorite trading card games, and playmats. Qualifying orders even come with free dice. All of those affiliate links can be found in the show notes, and you just need to use the code BardRockCafe at checkout to save on your order.
Where are we now, Llewellyn?
Well, Meanie, it looks like we've arrived in a universe where Jump Leads is part of the Bard Rock network of podcasts.
The Bard Rock Network? Wow! That's a whole new audience ready to experience our adventures jumping through parallel universes, like when we found that colony of religious robots, or the time we were chased by a knife-wielding dinosaur.
What about when you spent a whole episode looking for a bathroom?
We don't have to talk about that.
Listen to the scripted sci-fi comedy podcast audiences are calling excellent, superb, and top-notch. No, really, people are saying that. Jump Leads, Season 1 available now wherever you get your podcasts.
Who was that?
Sounds like this reality is actually an ad spot.
An ad spot? Wait, so none of this is canon?
It was, until you asked that question.
So you are, you know, the host and the common denominator in every episode of Party of One. do you also oversee like pretty much every aspect of the post-production, the like booking guests and all of that outside stuff?
Before production, yes. After production, no. Like, I do manage the booking and guest arrangement mostly. But Jen Frank, producer of the show, and I are like in constant conversation about like what we want the show to be, like the kinds of guests we want to be reaching out to, the what we want to see out of the show. Regularly we will kind of bounce ideas off of each other of like, oh, would it be cool if we tried to reach out to this person? Yes, that would be sick. Let's reach out to this person, and we'll bounce ideas, or kind of go like, hey, like we could talk to this person, like this is a friend of ours, and we talk to them about doing the show, that sort of thing. And then once an episode is recorded, Jen and I split editing and post-production work 50-50. She'll edit half of the episodes, I will edit the other half. We do it on an alternating week schedule. This is also a very conscious thing that is factored into the flow of the show that I think has made the show stronger as a result. Jen, I always say Jen hates episodes that she describes as like she hates what she calls like misery episodes. My friend Noah, once upon a time, I pitched him a game that we were playing on Party of One. He was just like, hey, what games do you have coming up? And I described the game, and he just looks at me for a long time quietly and says, Jeff, that's not a game, that's being sad. And I think about that a lot. And like, Jen hates editing episodes that are not a game, they are being sad. I can't fucking get enough of listening to two people be sad on a microphone. That's my catnip. I will listen to that all day. And so like there's a conscious give and take to the show that has sort of like shaken out because we are handing off editing duties and post-production on a week-to-week basis. Of you will regularly get a flow of like a more serious, more emotional, a heavier episode couched on either side by sort of lighter, more exciting, adventurous fare, specifically because those are the episodes that Jen and I both enjoy listening to, and we will sit down usually on an ongoing basis at least every couple of weeks, and I'll like kind of tell Jen like, this is what we've got on the calendar, which are the episodes that you want to edit, I'll take whichever ones you don't want. We kind of like carve up the show 50-50 and sort of let it shake out. But the end result of that is that like it has made the emotional flow of the show such that like if you are only interested in one of those two categories, you're still going to get at least an episode every other week that kind of hits that vibe.
Yeah. No, yeah. I noticed that. I noticed when I was scrolling through Spotify, and I noticed some of the episodes that I kind of like. There was a few that I listened to all the way through, and there was some that I tried, and some that I was like, okay, I'll get a feel for what it's like. And you can really tell when you've edited it, it's been by somebody who's really paid attention and really knows what beats to put into the story and which bits to cut out. You can hear it all the way through. I don't know what the technical term is, but having to listen to some of the actual plays, there's no dead air in yours. It's just, that's how it goes. It keeps going. And sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's really funny, sometimes it's adventurous. But I know that whoever's cut it knows how to make the story sound fantastic and keep going. And that's one of the things I did enjoy.
I really appreciate hearing that. That is really and it's funny because like there's a distinct balance in how we edit. Like there's a particular needle that we have to thread because the show is so indebted to that kind of interview, and because we are kind of like cultivating such a specific energy, it is a particular needle to thread of how aggressively can we edit this while still making it feel like you are present for a really intimate, like if you over chop it, if you overcut the episode, you lose that sense of intimacy. It stops the magic of Party of One, like the secret sauce of even the funniest, the lightest, the most fun and goofy episode, the secret sauce is that you, the listener, are hearing a moment between two people that almost feels like you're not supposed to be hearing it. Like that to me is the magic of Party of One. Whether that is two people who are both in tears because we're having a really, sad emotional moment, whether that is me and a dear friend discovering a My Little Pony RPG like a serial killer manifesto in his attic. Like it's capturing moments that like feel like you, the listener, are not necessarily supposed to be in the room for. Like that is what we are trying. And like if you overcut that, if you chop out too many of the silences, if you chop them too aggressively, if you cut out too many of it's counterintuitive almost, because if you cut out too many of the ums or likes or pauses or what do I want to say here, what do we want to happen here, like it loses that feeling. Like it loses the effect that we are sharing this moment together. If you I had this conversation I've had this conversation with like people who discover the show, and like we regularly hear, I don't like most actual play, I like Party of One because I'm hearing the conversation. And like if you foreground the fictional world too much, you lose the sense that you are hearing an intent, like hearing this deep conversation between two people. And so like how do you aggressively edit that so that it can be like as tight a presentation as possible? Because I don't want you to have to listen to more than 90 minutes of podcast, because I recognize that's already longer than your average episode. How do you get it to that tight, ready, that like as tight and lean and mean a package as possible, while still making it feel like you're hearing a moment that you're not supposed to be in the room for? All of which is to say, I really appreciate you recognizing that, because it does. There is a tremendous amount of work, and I am lucky. I am incredibly lucky to work with and also coincidentally be married to someone with such an incredible ear for like audio editing and storytelling. Fun fact, I taught Jen to edit for Party of One. She had asked me as we were like, we'd had all the kind of early conversations. I had been editing the show. I learned audio editing in college. And so like I had been editing the first crop of episodes, and Jen, like we'd been having a lot of conversations. We were doing a lot of the like producer production work, and she goes like, I would like to be more involved in the show. What else can I do to kind of like take on more of the show? And I was like, honestly, the thing that I would most need is editing. And she's like, I would love more than anything to learn how to edit. I gave her a 20-minute clip of an episode, showed her like the very basics of audio editing, like here's how to delete some audio, here's how to like silence some things, and kind of like, and then I kind of just told her like, hey, like take a pass at this and like edit this, let me hear what you're doing and I'll give you feedback. She edited it. I took a listen, and there was a sequence between two characters that she reimagined the way that we were having the conversation. Like, it was a Party of One clip, and the guest had said something. I remember specifically what it was, because it was a very funny phrase. It was, the guest was like bragging about physique, and says like, and is talking about like, you're gonna have peaks, you're gonna be freaks. And Jen like she was like, I remember listening to that, and like when I edited it, I reduced that silence so that it was like tighter, but like I kept that pause because I thought that pause was important. I listened to the one Jen did, and she literally edited it so it's just, you're gonna be peaks, you're gonna be freaks. And I was like, that's genuinely so much funnier. It's so much funnier if he's just rattling these things off rapid fire. And like it wasn't that she had just cut out silences like across the board very relentlessly. She just listened to that one piece of audio and is like, it's funnier if it's edited in this way. Let me bring out the joke. And like, I was like, this can't be the first time that you've sat down to edit audio. And like, that was 8 years ago. And I've gotten to like watch her produce award nominated editing work since then and been like, it is remarkable to watch somebody thrive in a skill set in real time, is what I will say.
Amazing.
On further reflection, I didn't realize how immersed I was able to get into an episode with, you know, the style of editing that you guys did, because a lot of actual plays, especially ones that we've covered, are like, okay, we got to have this kind of backing track and this Foley work and all this, and it almost gets away from the spirit of like collaborative storytelling and improv in favor of, you know, making a good polished product. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but this style was something that I think I haven't heard before in the medium, and it was very, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, I was like, yeah, that actually is kind of refreshing.
We're aiming for something much different than I think a lot of other shows. Like I will openly flex on this because it's something I'm very proud of. Like, I've said it a couple times, but like realizing like the actual shows that I think like we draw, as much as I say, and also, and I've said this to James D'Amato several times, I've said this to Super Dylan several times, even with the caveat that I openly stole the format of One Shot. Point blank, you can hear the early episodes, it's even more obvious. I am and have been doing One Shot with an extra gimmick attached. Talent borrows and genius steals. It is the nature of the things that we do, and it's important to name your influences in that way. But like, even with that considering, like the thing, you know, we have a really specific palette of inspirations that we draw from. Being in Philadelphia, being in the home of NPR WHYY member-supported radio, am a absolute sucker for Fresh Air. I think it is one of the greatest radio shows ever produced. I think Terry Gross is one of the greatest interviewers to ever like sit down in front of a microphone, and I'm not saying something especially controversial in saying that. She's just that good, and I think anybody that has heard a Terry Gross interview would probably say the same thing. Like, I take a lot from that kind of interview show, because over time I realized like the nature of the show is just pulling on that conversation and that moment between two people, and fundamentally kind of like building in that space like a lot of actual play shows. And I think this is a good direction for the art form overall and for the shows overall. And like, I see the intention behind a lot of it are pulling in the direction of like staged, devised theater. Like, they're pulling into immersive theater. We are pulling from a different media tradition, and I think it means that we're making something that is like often unrecognizable when you pair it up to a lot of other shows, and I think that is the coolest thing on the planet.
100%, yeah. I can see. Yeah, when you mentioned about theatre, I'm like, yeah, seeing people advertise for actual plays at the moment it's almost like it is a stage theatre production.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the actual plays are heading towards, and just to recognise that you are doing something different, to just bring a fresh look on things and have those, even though it's TTRPGs and you're still playing TTRPGs, it's just a different way of playing them.
Mm-hmm.
And even to, you know, to say that you're offering a fresh take may not necessarily even be the right term, because you've been in this space for,
True,
you know, as long as you have. You know, it's you've kind of almost always had this. You've had this fresh take on a medium that has existed for about as long as you've been doing it, and as it changes, you're able to still say, hey, this is still worth doing it this way as well.
And thing about the show, like, I think it is notable, and I think, like, you've probably heard it in the episodes that you listen to, is that, like, it's very... The reference point that I would point to is we have followed a similar key to longevity that came up in a conversation about something completely unrelated. I was talking with a dear friend about Bob's Burgers and about, like, how astounding it is that Bob's Burgers has been so consistently good for as long as it has been on. Mm-hmm. Like, it is on season 14 now, I think.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Might be 15. They might have might be 15. It might be 14. 15 they've been on 15 seasons, or 14 seasons confirmed for a 15th. Wow. And the show is still among the best shows on television every single week. Like, the shows they the 14th season was among their best. The movie was expected. And my friend pointed out, like, that's because that's kind of 4 different TV shows. You can watch through Bob's Burgers and you can watch them change the formula in very discrete ways at specific points, which prevents the show from ever getting boring. Like, it is this very Adult Swim oriented show. Like, it is a very, like, adult cartoon kind of risque thing in seasons 1 and 2. And then they figure out that they want to do something else. So they switch the tone into, like, seasons like 3 through 6. And then they switch the tone again, and it becomes much more, like, a much more ambitious, experimental, like, musical show. And then they switch the tone again and become, like, a hyper-focused, like, affirming family show. Like, you watch them turn those dials and go, like, we're going to change the show to keep it from getting stale. And I think, like, to our credit, even if at times we weren't necessarily thinking of this consciously, like, Party of One has taken a few different approaches over the years. Like, our focus point has changed, and every year or two Jen and I sit down and be like, okay, what do we want the show to be? What are we enjoying? What are we tired of? Like, what excites us? What isn't working? And, like, making those small changes to where the show kind of, in the same format, has a slightly different tone, like, has helped the show exist where it has existed in a sort of different place over the last 8 years. Like, for as much as I joke about stealing the format of One Shot, like, we very quickly realized that the show wasn't an improv comedy podcast in the same way that One Shot often, especially like when D'Amato was the host in the early days of the show, it was an improv comedy podcast that used games. And, like, realizing that, like, our show wasn't that meant that we kind of retooled it. It became something else. Realizing eventually that the show wasn't necessarily about, you know, the question of how do you play a game with just 2 people. Like, that question was very prominent at one point and then kind of fell away because we kind of answered that question and didn't feel like we needed to stay in that space. And so, like, the sense of the why of the show has changed a few times. And, like, now in a year or two, I might be saying all of these things about it being an interview show and having commonalities with Fresh Air, and I might look back and go, well, that was true at the time, but it's not true in 2027. Like, yeah. The show has taken a lot of forms over the years under the same umbrella, which I think is a really fascinating thing.
Yeah. The premise of the show is you plus one person who you may not even have known before starting recording or building up to the recording type thing. And it's just so nice how you easily bounce off each other. You can hear the rapport that you've got going with this other person. Even somebody who may not know what the game is, what's happening, obviously what's happening, but what sort of game, like maybe 2-3 weeks ago, they didn't even have heard of this game. And it's just so nice to hear how you easily just sort of pick this person and take them along with this journey that's. I'm listening to you all talking. I'm sitting there thinking, this is like it's less than 90 minutes. All these shows, all these episodes. It's just so. It's just that arc. You've got like 90 minutes to tell this tiny little story with somebody who you've never, maybe not spoken to for a long time, and it's just amazing to hear you take that and run with it. And I didn't know if it was the editing, but listening to you, I think it's probably the hosting as well. And it's just sort of like you've got sort of captured something that's just absolutely magical. I think I'm going to say that probably.
I love that. I love hearing this. I will say it comes down to three things. It comes down to three key pieces. One of those is editing, because
Yes.
it's funny to hear you say like, oh, the average episode's about an hour and 20, and I'm like, well, our average recording's about an hour 45, so that tracks.
Yeah.
I'm like, that makes
Right.
sense, sure. That's about the amount that I would say is cut out of an episode, is somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's part, like, hosting is a part of it, like, in terms of, you know, guiding the guest, showing, you know, knowing where the audience is going to want us to go, and kind of like running the show on that front. And the third thing is, like, there's an iceberg of prep that goes into the show
I can imagine.
that the listener doesn't hear,
Yeah.
that allows me to my number one job. And I say this for Party of One. I say this for the business podcasts that I produce in my day job. My number one job is to make the guest as comfortable as possible, because the sooner we can get past the artifice of everything, the easier we can get to what makes the show great. And so, like, it's a lot of, we have like forms that we have the guest fill out that kind of answer questions around like, what game do you want to play? What do you want to come up during the recording? What topics do you absolutely not want to come up?
Cool.
You know, we have like guest like packets of information that we share with guests to be like, here's what recording is going to look like. Here's what I need you to have in terms of hardware. Here's what the flow is going to look like. I'm going to ask you this stuff at the top. We're going to talk. I go through a lot of that stuff before we hit record, of like, okay, cool, I'm going to throw it over to you at the top, talk about the game. We kind of run through everything before I hit record. So a lot of that stuff is not rehearsed in the sense that like we are rehearsing what we're going to say, but rehearsed in the sense of, so you know what the next thing that is going to happen is, so that I can kind of guide us through the next hour and a half as seamlessly as possible.
Amazing. It really shows. I was going to say I was going to ask about what prep, but you've already gone through that. So I was just thinking that there must be a lot of prep that goes through the before you even hit record. But thank you for that. Yeah, that was my next question.
That's I mean, you queued me up nicely. It was easy. It was easy to kind of go like, it's easy to kind of like slide in to talk about the prep stuff of like, a big thing for me also is like, that also really proves helpful when I am talking to guests that are outside of our collective spaces. Like when I'm talking to somebody that like is not a game designer or podcaster or something like that. Like if I'm talking to like a non-games podcaster or a musician or something, having all of those like prep stuff, I can kind of step in and go like, okay, don't worry about like needing to know anything about games. Just tell me what you like, what you want to happen. I will find us a game that fits that vibe. It allows me to kind of take some of that pressure of you're going to be in a game you're going to be playing a game for the next hour and a half, to say like, all you need to do is tell me what you like and I will handle the rest. And then it kind of takes a little bit of that pressure off, which lets us get to that good stuff quicker.
Bella. Yeah.
What are some games that you've played on the show or otherwise that have really stuck with you, or like what's been some of your favorites to run or to just play?
It's a great question. I am going to take this as a chance to just scream about one of the episodes that you listened to, because it was I cannot emphasize how much I think about the idea that you can just find a My Little Pony RPG waiting for you in your house. Like, that's just a thing that happened. And, like, do you know how often I find myself just being like, why was that in his fucking, like, why was that in his house? Like, I think about that so
Surely this was
often.
covered in the closing costs, right?
It, like, truly, like, I, like, find it, like, the VHS tape in The Ring, just waiting for you. Like, and I think, like, to me, that is, more broadly the kind of thing that I love, which is, like, I love, more broadly, I love games that are so weird that, like, it kind of, that, like, I love games that are so hyper specific that, like, it feels like that you can feel the designer being like, I need to express this.
Yes.
And that, like, from a radio perspective or a performance perspective, that kind of feel like you're not going to ever hear them in another place. Like, I like using Party of One to spotlight games that, like, you might never hear on another actual play for a lot of reasons. Like, that to me is kind of a vibe that I always chase after a little bit. Is, like, do I think this is a game that you will ever hear on another show? Are we going to make something that, like, is so specific no one else is ever going to do it? Bad Moon is a game that is really special to me. Bad Moon is a game by Adira Slattery. It is a game for two people, one of whom is the moon.
Okay.
The idea is that the moon has done you wrong. The moon has hurt you. She has pissed you off, and it is time to stop letting her get away with it. We took this game, this, like, weird lyric game that's kind of a single player game with this sort of, like, metaphysical second player, and did the weirdest thing that we could do. Adira came to me and was like, would you play this game? Like, she's like, I know it's not quite the normal vibe. And I said, yes, on the one condition that you let me make the guest for the episode the actual moon in the actual sky, and that we have you on the recording as an impartial observer for this episode.
Oh, wow.
And so we start the episode off, and I say, like, my guest this week is the moon. Moon, thanks so much for joining us on Party of One. So glad to have you as well. This is going to be great. Why don't you take a moment and let everyone know what you're working on? Sure. I mean, yeah, of course.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And, like, playing the game with, and, like, it's a real joy to, like, play with silence in that episode and, like, get to, like, explore those moments when the game gets really intense and emotional partway through, and it turns into, like, you are venting and, like, unleashing all of the ways that this, like, metaphysical entity has hurt you, and, like, playing with silence and, like, building the space around it. I don't think anybody else is ever gonna like really make that into a thing, and I think there's something really special about that episode to me. And, like, the My Little Pony episode is kind of another example of that, of, like, this was something where a weird thing had happened, and Alex came to me and he showed me this game, and to her credit, this is why Jen is producer of the show. She was the one that looked at both of us staring at this piece of paper and went, so when are you two going to play this on the show? And I was like, fucking obviously this is going to happen. Like, obviously.
Right now, get the mics out.
We have to. And so, like, it is a weird thing that occurred that can never be replicated and can never, and, like, exists on the show because it cannot exist anywhere else. And, like, that to me is the kind of game and the kind of experience that I think I want from the show at all times.
So I feel like I have to know about the My Little Pony game. Is this a game that you can find on the internet now? Or was it just like a one-time thing? They found it in their house and it was just like, here it is.
So,
and you've never seen it again.
Here's what I will say. We consciously we, as you heard on the episode, we consciously removed the name of the game from like referencing it on the recording. We don't refer to it by name in the episode itself. We only ever call it the My Little Pony RPG Alex Perlman found in his house when he moved in. The reason for that is that it is a game you can find on the internet. It is a game that exists, and we did not, given the circumstances of that episode and the tone that we took, we did not feel it was right or fair to like bring the designers of that game into the conversation, because we did not want it to feel like we were making fun of a specific game. Like the for lack of a better way to put it, as I think we said when we were producing the episode, Alex and I had like a whole conversation about this before we hit record. We both kind of immediately agreed the joke of that episode is not at any point the game that we are playing. It is entirely that we found a weird role-playing game. Like, if we named the game on mic, it would feel like we were casting that joke. Like we were making that game the butt of the joke.
Absolutely.
Which is to say, you can find the game online, and there is a chance if you ever find a My Little Pony RPG on the internet that you might think in the back of your mind, is this the one that Jeff and Alex played on the show? I will never confirm or deny this. But
there are several.
There are several out there, and one of them is, in fact, the game that we played on the show. Yeah, which is like, we wanted to be, like, we needed to play that game. We needed to make that episode. We knew that we could not make the joke of that episode the game itself, because it was a game that, like, people play. Like, we have evidence that people played it. We have a printed out version from a person that was not the designer in this house. Like, we have evidence that it was a game that was played. So we were like, how do we make that the case without ever making it the joke? And honestly, making the name of the game the RPG that Alex Perlman found in his house made it genuinely much funnier as an episode.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah.
One other thing I just kind of want to call out real fast, because I was doing some digging into the show notes to find Bad Moon, because it sounds very interesting to me. I love that you've credited the moon with the NASA webpage of the moon.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
it's where people can find more information about the moon.
I just love finding little in-jokes like that in show notes every now and then. It's just very fun.
I had a lot of fun with the show notes and the intro and outro to this episode, very specifically. I think in the episode, I almost remember it verbatim, because I think about a joke that I made in the intro so often, where I say that the moon from her work controlling the Earth's tides, and from the night sky where she orbits at a distance of 119,000 miles, and also from her appearances in movies such as E.T. and Weekend at Bernie's 2.
That's amazing.
And in her work in music, such as in the song That's Amore. That was the other thing that I mentioned, and I was very proud of that joke.
That's great.
I need to listen to this episode.
I love shows that aren't afraid to like just have a little fun, you know.
It's we are fundamentally like making a very silly thing at the end of the day. For as much as I appreciate the artistry and I recognize like the seriousness of the art of it, like, this is also an art form where we are playing silly make-believe games, and I think like there is an inherent kind of joy in that. Sometimes that joy can come in the form of like intense emotion or like, catharsis or pain or any number of things. But like, it is still an art form where we are playing games. We are rolling little rocks on the table and going like, ooh, a 7. Like, that is a piece of the art form that I never want to see get left behind.
Well, Vicky, do you have anything you want to hit before we wrap up?
Do we do a generic, if anybody could be at your table, who would it be? Type question.
True. That's the one that we like to ask everybody is any person, alive, dead, real, fictional. If you could have them at your table, who would you like to have? You can do like a top 3 if you want.
Retired former center for the Philadelphia Eagles, Jason Kelsey, number 62, who is not hanging on my wall currently, but that's only because the tarot card is over on the side of the room and I haven't gotten a frame that's quite the right size yet.
Straight away, knew the answer.
I know
Awesome.
this is a question that I've had locked in for years now, since 2017 when I watched this man dress as a mummer and thank the city of Philadelphia for our first ever Super Bowl by declaring that hungry dogs yell faster and then yelling so many F-bombs that they had to cut away the broadcast to a still photo shot of the Philadelphia skyline.
Oh no, I missed this. This sounds cultural relevance. This does.
It's one of the most culturally relevant moments of my lifetime is Jason Kelsey's Super Bowl speech. Think about it a lot.
Yeah, based on like pictures and what I know of the guy, he feels like he would know how to party.
He's
good.
Philadelphia's uncle, and he'll never pay for a beer in this town again.
Well, with that, I think we're coming to the end of our time together. Jeff, I just want to say thank you again so much for taking a chance on us and coming and speaking with us about your show.
Of course.
Do you want to let the people know where they can find you?
Yeah, of course. You can find Party of One at partyofonepodcast.com. You can also find me on Twitter, as long as that's still a website, as well as Blue Sky, Tumblr, TikTok, everywhere else at either Party of One Pod or Party of One Podcast, depending on the character limits of that particular website.
Well, normally we would, well, I guess not normally anymore. We would roll for what our next show we were going to cover is going to be. But good news is we are booked out through the end of the year for guests. So we will see you with another special guest and another new show right here on College of Whispers. Thank you. And until next time, may your backlog grow ever shorter. Thanks for listening to College of Whispers. Our intro and outro song is Everything by Winter Wayfarer. Check them out on all major streaming platforms. You can find College of Whispers on social media at all the relevant places listed in the show notes. College of Whispers is a Bard Rock Network production. Learn more about the network in the show notes and on social media. Thank you for checking out our show. As a reminder, we're part of Bard Rock Network, who you can support by checking out our sponsor, Dragon Master Games. Support our local game store, get yourself some TTRPG essentials, and help the network produce some more excellent content. It really makes a difference. Our show and all the other shows on Bard Rock Network wouldn't be possible without the support of people like you on our Patreon and Ko-fi. That's why we like to thank supporters who pledge above a certain tier at the end of network productions. This month's top supporters are Sarah, Queen, Viralore, Khadijah, Marty, and Paul. Thank you all so much for supporting the network. If you want to get shoutouts and other rewards, pledge on our Patreon or Ko-fi today. Links in the show notes.